The next thing you'll need is all of your strips, your cutoffs from making the other blocks. Now here's the rule. No less than 4 inches long. That's the shortest that you can get away with. And all of your strips need to be a minimum of 1 inch wide. That will take care of it. You can do a variation or you can use all in one length. You'll see as we progress and go along. And we're going to create some strip sets to make the sleeves and then the body. You will also need your background fabric. This is just a great time for scrap buster, and if not, it's a way to combine all the fabrics you may have selected that you want to make into your quilt. So let's get started making our ugly but beautiful Christmas sweater for the Holiday DIYer Winter Quilt Along series. To build out my sets, I pretty much go ahead and put all of the same fabric into one pile as far as my strips. Then that way I can easily grab them and make my set. You will either need one continuous length of fabric that is 8 inches long because you're going to be making a left sleeve and a right sleeve. In order for our left sleeve and our right sleeve to come out somewhat right, we need to match our strip sets in their sizes. So I'm going to go with 4.5 inches long, and I'm going to select 2 strips that are 1 inch wide and 2 strips that are 1.5 inches wide. And the same down here for the other sleeve. If you want to do them all the same color, that is okay. I'm going to make my left sleeve and my right sleeve different colors because it's my ugly Christmas sweater, and you can make it the way you want. However, just bear in mind that if you do your strips 1 inch or 1.5 inch, you need to have the same amount in the first set as you do in the second set. I will sew all of these together and then I can cut it down. It doesn't matter what order they're in. You can have the 1.5s next to each other, the 1 inches next to each other. You build it out the way that you want to. The idea is you want 4 strips and they need to match in height. So now I have my set sewn together. I want these to be 3.5 inches tall, and that's what they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the difference from my strip sets. I have both of them lined here, and I can easily just go straight up and do them at the same time. Now you can save these pieces, and you could even undo the stitches if you needed them for another project. Now we have our strip sets. Just make sure that you've got it squared up to 4 inches by 3.5 inches. Making 2 sets, making each sleeve at least 3.5 inches in height. So now I've sewn these strips together. I'm going to press these open and see what kind of measurement I have. And when you press these, some of them are just want to flare out, but try to press them all going in one direction. Whether it be up or down, press them all in the same direction. Alright, so these look really, really nice. And here's our second set. I'm going to go ahead and cut it 4 inches wide. The next thing we want to do is we want to bring down 2 2-inch squares and our 2 2.5-inch squares. Let's do our 2.5-inch squares first. You have to really truly use your mind and be focused whenever you do this. The first thing I want to do though is on these squares, on these 2.5-inch squares, I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to line it up from corner to corner, and I'm going to draw a line that will be my seam line. So I'm using my friction erasable pen. You can use any ink pen, this won't show up, but if you were worried about leaving a mark, the friction ink pens can be found in your office supply department. It has to be the erasable kind, and just the heat from your iron will erase the line. If you're using it on white, I do warn because it can leave a bit of a residue. Now these 2.5-inch squares, because I know that I can get a bonus, I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch over from that marked line, and I'm going to draw another line. Now I'll show you what's going to happen with that. Let's do this one the same way, corner to corner, and then we'll put the extra line a 1/2 inch over. So lay your 1/2 inch mark on the drawn line, and that gives a 1/4 inch seam allowance for both. Now this is what I'm talking about when you have to truly focus. You're going to place one of these squares in the lower corner of your block, and you're going to sew from the upper right to the lower left on both of them. You're going to do the opposite on the other square. So you're going to turn your fabric and you're going to put it in the lower corner, because these are going to be the sleeves, and you'll really truly understand once this is complete. And you're going to sew a line from the lower corner to the upper, and the same here on the sewn line. What we're going to do is take our ruler and we're going to lay it, that 1/4 of an inch mark on your ruler, we're going to lay it directly down on that sewn line. That will allow a 1/4 inch allowance over here. And what you get is this bonus of a 1/2 square triangle. And we will end up with these little bonus squares we can have for this project or another project. And you can press those open. So let's cut this one off, and then we can go to the ironing board and press them open, marking on the actual sewn line and cutting off the extra. That allows that 1/4 of an inch seam line on this side. So once again, I'm going to lay my 1/2 inch measurement over, because we need a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then on the other little 1/2 square, we also need a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when we get to the sewing machine, sew directly on those lines. So now that I've got these sewn on, we're going to take our ruler again. This time we're going to use our 1/4 of an inch measurement, and we're going to lay it directly on the actual sewn line, and we're going to cut off that little square. And we will iron these back. We'll press them open. So here we have our angles already on, and this is looking good. Here's our little mini squares. We can put those aside and use them for another project. Now, looking at our pieces here, as we sewn them correctly, yes, we have, because remember, one is going to be the left sleeve and one is going to be the right sleeve. So now you can kind of see how it's taken form. These are looking really, really nice. Now we want to bring down our 2-inch squares. Once again, let's take our marker or our ink pen and our ruler, and let's draw a line from corner to corner on these squares. Now on these, because we have to be aware of how this is working, this is actually going to be flowing on the right side of the sweater. This one is going to be on the left side of the sweater. And so we're turning them this way. Now you're starting to see your sleeve take form. So this is what you do. You take your 2-inch squares that we draw the line on, and we are once again going to snowball the corner. It's going to put that little square there and sew it from corner to corner. There will not be a lot of fabric left over from this cutoff. And if you are up to a real challenge, you can do them that teeny tiny. But it really, truly is such a small amount, you may not wish to wrestle with it. And I'm just putting a pin there to keep that in place until I get to the machine with it. And we are going to sew directly on that line as we did the first ones. As we did before, we're going to lay our 1/4 of an inch marking directly on that seam line and cut off the difference, because we need that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So it's not enough that you can truly get a decent square out of it. It would be this small, and then by the time you put something around it, it would just disappear in your fabric. So now let's press this open and see what we have. Ta-da! We have our sleeves. We have our left sleeve and we have our right sleeve. That's just looking beautiful. So let's set these aside, and now we need to build our stripe sets for the body, and that is for the actual sweater itself. The rule on this is these need to be at least 5 inches wide, and that's what we're going for. So just build your layers and lay your fabrics in any way you want, and just keep sewing them together. The goal here is we want this sweater body to be to 7.5 inches tall. That's the goal. And so you can put various strips together, and you'll be able to put more in this strip set to get it tall. And we have all these different strips, so you just keep building it until you get it up to that point. And I'm going to just start sewing strips together and see how tall I get it. I have several of my strips sewn together. I'm going to press them open. Oh my goodness, that is 7.5 inches. That's exactly what I needed, and it worked out perfect. Look at that. exactly 7.5 inches. I'm going to cut off this difference. We need this to be 5 inches wide. There we have our body of our sweater made. And this is moving along really fast. All right, so here we have our sleeves. And the way you want your sleeves to run is the 2.5 inch square is going to go upward. So when you look at the sleeves, lie them this way with the 2 inch square corner in the side, and let the sleeves run vertical. Now the next thing is we have to make our connection up here. We have to create a neck. We need a 3.5 inch by 1.5 inch piece that's going to be the actual neck of the sweater. So I've selected my piece that's going to be my neck, and I have my background fabrics. So all we're going to do is we are going to sew one piece of background fabric to each side and then press open. So now that I have my neck piece on and my background fabrics, I am basically going to sew this to the top, and then we can square it up and trim off anything extra. And I am just centering that, and I have my markings on my mat up here. I know that's 5 inches, and so therefore I know that these seams need to be lined up with the little markings up here. So if you are trying to center yours, just line up the seams. There's your 5 inches, 5 inches, and then this piece is 3.5, so we can already see that it's 3.5. We know that that's going to be a 1/2 inch bearing if we've got it turned over backwards on each side. And when we put this on we can line up the pieces of that cut piece on the same inside markings there. And that way we know it is centered. It may not look centered, but it is centered. And now if we want to keep that from going anywhere, you can pin it and transport it to the machine. If you want to check yourself, just lean it back and you can easily see it is in the center. So let's press it open and see what we've got. That is absolutely gorgeous. I am so pleased. I love my sweater, and I would wear this if I had one. Now we're going to center this. Once again, we're going to use our seam lines to line up on our mat, and we are going to trim off any difference that is overhanging, including if you did like I did and used pieces from a square. Our blocks will already be squared, and we will not even have to redo that. So we are really truly going to put it to the challenge. We're going to create our very own unique sweater to where our sleeves are coming back in. So I'm going to take my seam ripper, and I am very gently going to remove these background squares. And I just really quickly go through there with my seam ripper, and I can cut those stitches about every 3 or 4 stitches over. I just kind of go through there real quick, and I can pick up that little stitch and break it. What's really cool about that is when I do that on that side, I can come on the back side and tickle that thread up, and when I pull it, it's going to pull all those loose. It's going to pull all those little threads over to this side, and voila, that's going to free that up. So all I have to do is pick those little broken stitches out, and you don't have all this trouble, and it comes out real easy. So I'm going to finish removing this square. I just go every few stitches, and I will break that thread. It's just a quick way that you can do it when you're able to see those threads. I pick it up and I break it. And you don't have to worry about ripping your fabric when you do this if you are able to pick that stitch. And then once you go every, I don't know, maybe every 4 or 5 stitches and pick it, you can then go to the other side and just tickle that thread up. It's going to let go. And then when you get it tickled up, pull it, and ta-da, it lets go of that square. Real easy. And then anything that I have left, of course, I can just move that stitch out real quick. And it does not take but seconds to get this loose. And you don't damage your fabric. You don't rip it or get it torn or frayed up and make it hard to use it again. Now these intersected whenever I sewed them, so of course you're going to have that anchor stitch that's going to hold tight, and sometimes just coming to this side of the fabric and just pulling it towards you to let it go. And then I'll pull on the fabric a bit so I can get the thread to come up to me, and I don't have to dig in there and start destroying that fabric. Sometimes you can do a little corner break, you can get it to let go. And there we go. So now another thing I want to do, because I'm going to be putting this back at the machine to add the other sleeve onto the bottom, I will take loose enough stitches that I feel to give me that grace to where I can get that under my machine and reattach it, because it's not hard to do. So I'll just take those stitches out and attach my new piece to the bottom, and then of course I can sew it back down. So here we are. This looks fantastic now, doesn't it? All we have to do now is attach these to each side, and then we can reattach it to the body. But before I do that, let me just go over this to be sure that you acknowledge our 2-inch square. This is a 2-inch square. The 2.5 inch is on the outside. Once again, same over here. 2-inch square, and our 2.5 inch is on the outside of our background fabric. That's what we are going by, and that's what we're matching up. Now before I attach the body back, it is important to press this out and make sure that those seams are pressed out the same as you would any other time. I'm going to press those. Then when I get done, I'm going to simply lay that over and sew it down. And as you can see, it is exactly the right length with no problem at all. I do not think I could be any more pleased. It is absolutely beautiful. Our holiday ugly Christmas sweater turned out pretty gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous, just as I had pictured it in my mind. And for those of you who stuck around to see this particular sweater come together, you are going to enjoy making one of your own, and I know you're truly, truly going to see. And without even planning it, a lot of these fabrics really, truly just come together as though you were wearing this Christmas sweater, and here's your sleeve. It just turned out beautiful. So the cutting that was originally done at the beginning of this video has now been changed and edited to accommodate the new pieces of the additional sleeves. And the other change on this part of the video is that we decided to flow this square vertically versus horizontally, and that made this one equal to that size, and we didn't have to change anything there. So everything else is the same. Sweater, the very same size as the one before, 11 by 8.5 inches. Pretty nice sweater. There you go. And you could do a whole quilt, maybe some with only the half sleeve and others with a full sleeve. You got 2 ways to go. Enjoy the holiday DIYer Ugly Christmas Sweater block for our winter quilt along series.